My sister burst into tears the moment the check touched her palm. $10 million. $10 million straight from our parents. Her hands shook as though she was holding fire, but she clutched it like it was salvation. Me? I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. Instead, I stared at the marble floor beneath our feet, letting my eyes trace the veins in the stone. They looked like highways leading out of that suffocating moment. Like maybe if I followed them far enough, I could escape the weight pressing on my chest. Dad leaned back in his leather chair, the kind bankers use when they're about to deny you a loan. His face was carved in stone, cold and unreadable, except for the faint curl of satisfaction at the corner of his lips. Mom reached across the table and touched my wrist. Her nails were polished, her touch soft, rehearsed, almost like she was consoling a stranger. "You're smart, darling," she whispered, her voice wrapped in silk but sharp enough to cut. "You'll earn your own. Someday, someday," the word hung in the room like smoke. Not comfort, not encouragement, a dismissal. The silence that followed wasn't the comfortable kind, the kind that comes from peace or understanding. No. This silence was thick, heavy, the kind born from all the things left unsaid. The lawyer shifted in his chair, clearing his throat. Thin glasses perched on the edge of his nose, hands trembling slightly as though he wasn't sure if he should even speak. "There is," he said carefully, "one more envelope from your grandfather." "It's sealed," Dad froze, just for a fraction of a second. But I caught it, and it wasn't grief that flickered in his eyes. It was calculation. The lawyer slid the envelope across the glossy oak table toward me. The air seemed to move slower as it came to rest in front of me. My fingers didn't tremble when I picked it up, but my breath hitched once, shallow and sharp, like I'd been caught in a lie. Dad watched. He wanted me to open it right there. No ceremony, no build-up, just the truth, ripped open like an old wound. When I slid my finger under the flap, the paper inside didn't rustle. It whispered, "Only to me." I should have expected it. The favoritism, the lies, the rewriting of wealth-like code in a private ledger, carefully edited to benefit the chosen one. Still, hearing my parents say the words out loud, "You'll earn your own someday," was a betrayal I hadn't rehearsed for. We had grown up in the same house, but not in the same world. Samantha was the golden child. The ballet lessons from private tutors, the summer trips to Vienna, the spotlight every time she walked into a room. Me, I was the resilient one. That's what they called me, like it was some kind of medal. Like resilience was just another way to say neglected, overlooked, expendable. As the lawyer continued reading the will, I kept my eyes on my parents. Watch the little things. The way Dad's jaw clenched tighter with every legal phrase. "Per legal instruction," the lawyer would say, and Dad's molars would grind just a bit more. The way Mom smoothed invisible wrinkles from her silk blouse over and over, as though tidiness could hide her guilt. The envelope burned in my lap. I hadn't unfolded the letter completely, just enough to glimpse the bold signature at the bottom. My grandfather's unmistakable, immaculate handwriting, and one line scrawled in his slanted hand, "If they kept this from you, it's because they knew you'd be the only one to see it." I folded it shut again. Not here. Not now. So I smiled politely, gave a cool nod, and wore the mask they expected me to wear. But something inside my chest had cracked. Not anger, not sorrow, something colder. Recognition. That night, I couldn't sleep. The second night, I started digging. Quietly, carefully, I requested the full estate files from the firm. Nothing suspicious, just the broke daughter trying to understand her place in the family will. What they didn't expect was how fast I could move, how quickly I could read between the lines of legal jargon, code, and digital metadata. 3 days later, I found the first crack in their fortress, a property transfer buried deep inside a trust document, signed by my grandfather. Problem was, the date was weeks after he had already died. Forgery, not from some outsider. Not from a stranger. From my father, I dug deeper, running background checks on the trust's creation. And there it was, Samantha's name. She was just 17 when it was established. My name, of course, was nowhere. That was when the thought hit me. Sharp, unwanted, undeniable. I ordered a DNA test. Nothing fancy, nothing dramatic. Just a simple sibling comparison, enough to confirm what had begun to gnaw at me in the dark hours of the night. But I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I drove out to my grandfather's old cabin, the one hidden so far back in the woods that Mom had always refused to stay there more than an hour. The place hadn't changed. Dusty windows, wood creaking under my shoes, the faint smell of cedar clinging to every corner. But I wasn't there for nostalgia. I was there for the safe, the one hidden beneath the floorboards, the one he had shown me how to find. Not Samantha. Me. Inside the old study, the evidence lay spread out like a slow-burning confession, faded photographs with curled edges, brittle letters tied with the kind of twine you find in stationery shops, bank statements stamped with tiny, indifferent logos, and one single notarized sheet marked in stark black type, amended will, executor copy, signed only 6 months before Grandpa's stroke. My name was there, printed in the place that mattered, sole heir. It was impossible and simple all at once. The note I had opened at the reading hadn't been the final truth. It had been the fuse. And I was holding the match. I sealed the DNA results into an envelope and handed it to my sister out on the terrace. We stood shoulder to shoulder beneath an angry sky. The clouds bruised and low, the city skyline swallowed in a gray that hinted at rain. She laughed first, a quick, brittle sound, spraying a nervousness that hid in sarcasm. "You always were theatrical," she said, but her fingers shook when she opened the paper. I watched the expression fold on her face, first curiosity, then confusion, then the sickening hollow of realization. There was no sibling match, not a near miss. The numbers didn't lie. She stared at the printed sequence of letters and numbers like they were a punch in the stomach. Her eyes moved from the print to me as if I had personally rearranged our parents' past. For a moment, it felt as if truth itself had become an act of violence I didn't explain. I didn't plead. I let silence do the heavy lifting because words felt like cheap currency in that moment. The silence stretched until it cracked, and her voice came out small and ragged. "Why?" she breathed, as if I had rewritten our blood overnight. I left a second envelope on the teak table between us, the one stamped with our grandfather's seal, the amended will tucked inside. Watching her open it was like watching someone watch themselves unravel. The mask she'd worn for as long as I could remember, the golden daughter, the perfect smile, the social media photos where every hair was in place, slipped and fell away. For the first time, I saw the human shadow beneath it, fear, shame, and the rough rawness of someone who had been holding a lie together with 1,000 tiny threads. The next morning, I was at the lawyer's office before anyone else. The air inside the firm smelled of coffee and paper and the quiet triumph of bureaucracy. I told him exactly what I'd found. "Check the chain of custody," I said. "Trace every signature. Follow the notary stamp back to its owner." He paled. A small, involuntary motion that revealed how wrapped up in the status quo he'd been. How comfortable ignoring the oddity had been easier than looking. When my parents arrived, the table held them like a stage set holds actors. They saw me sitting where they had always thought they were supposed to see me, at the head, calm and composed. Father's face immediately tightened. He measured me with that old, weary squint of a man who has always believed he knew other people's limits. Mother reached, almost automatically, for Samantha's hand. I slid the file across to the lawyer without a word. I didn't need to narrate. I wanted the paperwork to speak with its sterile, unambiguous voice. There was no theatrical reveal. No raised voices. The evidence moved through the air like a verdict. Forgery, fraud, altered entries, stamped pages with handwriting that didn't match. Accounts siphoned, small deposits moved to shell LLCs, property titles quietly amended. The lawyer read it and then looked at them. At Father's blanched face, at Mother's downturned mouth. I watched the color leave their cheeks in a kind of slow-motion theater. Samantha didn't sob. She didn't plead or stammer. She stood there, monumentally stunned, because the check they'd given her, the one that had seemed like a validation of everything she believed, was suddenly legally void. The assets she had been allowed to manage were traceable now, and every careful siphon had a paper trail. I saw the way her hands clutched the envelope like someone trying to hold on to air. The lawyer turned toward me and read aloud the key passage. As per the amended will, the estate transfers solely to... And then his eyes flicked to me. I raised a hand, not to claim, but to halt the theatrics. "Cut him off," I said. I didn't want a parade. I wanted the truth. I wanted control of a narrative that had been stolen from me. I stood not in triumph, but in order to leave. The paragraph was a closing door, not an opening celebration. I never spoke to them again. Conversations stop in so many ways. Quietly, sharply, with mutual agreements not to reopen wounds. For a long while, I didn't touch the money. I watched it move through accounts the way a scientist watches a chemical reaction. Clinical, detached. The properties were reclaimed, retitled in careful legal prose. The investments unpicked and rerouted to accounts that were transparent and auditable. The truth had weight now, measurable and legal, and I let that be enough. Samantha vanished from the family orbit first, a name on a forwarding service. A few Instagram photos of a smiling woman on a sun-bleached terrace, tagged from a rehab spa somewhere in Italy. Mother left one message for me once, an awkward string of words that tried to be motherly. I deleted it. There was a careful, considered cruelty in doing it, and a self-preserving logic. You cannot repair everything with words. Father retreated into his silence. He had always underestimated my depths. That had been his first mistake. Thinking I would remain blind to their machinations was his last. Sometimes in the thin silver hours of the night, I still hear my grandfather's voice in my head. Not a ghost exactly, but the echo of someone who'd seen a lot and said fewer things to paper for the sake of clarity. If they kept it from you, that voice seemed to say in my memory, it's because they knew. He had known what the family could become in private. They had known that power makes people act in ways they would never admit on their polished patios and social columns. And now, finally, so did I. There were public changes, formal notices posted, title companies updated, press releases handled in the bland, professional tone the world expects. There were private reckonings, too. The small ripples that happen when the people who built a house of lies discover that the foundation has been dug out from under them. I watched how silence bent them. I watched the way Samantha's social feed grew curiously sweet and distant, as though it were easier to pretend the problem was a headache, a temporary storm, than an indictment. There were practicalities no one tells you about when riches move hands. Appraisals, tax filings, surveys at midnight when the only lights are the work lamps of men who know how to read deeds the way others read novels. I sat through hearings and spoke with bankers who hated the paperwork but loved the math. I signed forms that seemed to close chapters I had only just opened. Most nights I slept badly and woke up feeling older than I had any right to be. In time, the noise of the legal fight receded. The properties had been returned to their proper ledgers, trustee accounts populated with clear audit trails. We had rebuilt what had been sabotaged. I had not taken pleasure in the dollars or the plaques. My victory was procedural. It was about writing a crooked ledger and refusing to be erased. I had wanted, at the end of all the drama, something simple. The truth on paper and the right to decide what to do with it. Life after the dusting of scandal felt strange and thin at first. I learned to cook the way other people learn languages, slowly, with wonder at small successes, because there were moments when the ordinary reclaimed me. I walked the neighborhood without the familiar weight of family expectation. I took the dog to the park and watched other people's lives unspool in ordinary, mundane threads. There is a relief that comes with freedom from a lie, but also a loneliness. The house was quieter. Not because of acoustics, but because the usual performers had left the stage. Samantha's profile flared occasionally in gossip columns, a soft exile, a story that magazine editors turned into glossy copy. Heiress in rehab. Mother's name popped up in a society piece about charitable donations, neatly sanitized. Father flounced between terse phone calls with old business partners, always with the same look of a man trying to look smaller than the storm he'd made. People who had once been polite at the parties now looked away at gatherings. Patrons who once mattered made small adjustments in the guest lists. The world reacted like a mirror, always smoothing over what it preferred not to examine. Sometimes the memory of that terrace night returns like a film I cannot stop watching. Her laugh. The way the sky looked bruised, like an unhealed wound. The instant that everything altered when she read the numbers. It's an image I keep returning to because it captures the oddness of human life. How a set of digits can act like a scalpel, and how the naked truth can look like cruelty when it cuts through the comfortable. Fabric people sew around themselves. People. Ask if I felt triumphant when the estate reverted properly to me. There is an almost reflexive expectation that a person in my position should gloat, that poetic justice would taste sweet. But justice didn't feel sweet. It felt at best necessary. I did not celebrate. I executed the work of repair. I had the will notarized, the deed swapped, the accounts opened with a transparency that left no room for late-night ledgers or secret transfers. I told the lawyers to make the record public. I told the banker to audit every transaction from the past decade. You cannot erase what was done. You can only document it. On quiet evenings, I sometimes imagine what might have happened if the truth had been told earlier. If our grandfather had spoken plainly, if mother and father had chosen honesty like a practice rather than a convenience. The mind wanders down the road of alternate lives. What small human moments might have been different if there had been no prize to steal, no ledger to manipulate? I sometimes wonder about Samantha. Not the tabloid caricature who sits on a sun-drenched terrace in Italy, but the girl who once helped me braid our baby cousin's hair, or who used to hide cookies in her sleeve during family dinners. Who had she been before the currency of our family made her performance essential? Those are quiet questions. They don't change the past, but they keep a small human part of me alive. Because in the end, the fight was not for money itself. It was for the narrative, who we are allowed to be, who we are told we are by the people who love us, and whether we can survive the truth when it arrives. I still wake sometimes, with a momentary wish to ring up Father and tell him about the odd things I saw that morning. A blue jay on the fence, a neighbor's new porch light, and then I remember, he expected me to be small and silent and grateful. He expected that I'd let sleeping ledgers lie. That was his rule. Underestimate and be safe. But the first mistake was his. The last was thinking I would never look. And sometimes, when the house is very quiet and the city beyond my window is only a wash of distant lights, my grandfather's voice returns in a memory so vivid it feels like a presence. Not a scolding, but an explanation. If they kept it from you, it's because they knew. They knew what power does to people. I finally understand what he meant. They knew, and now so do I.